Welcome to Parenting Unscripted. I am your host, Katie Collette. A big thank you to Norfolk Public Schools for sponsoring this episode. Today, we are going to talk about teaching our children to drive. It is a pivotal moment in life, but also I think a really stressful one for us as parents, but also for our children who are getting ready to learn this really important life skill. To help guide us through this process today is Kristen Petway. She is the Executive Director of Drive Smart Virginia. Kristen, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this because I feel like my kid can't even really drive a go-kart. So I can't wait to hear everything that you have to say. But before we get to the tips and tricks for parents and programs that Drive Smart Virginia offers, I'd love for you to share with us a little bit about your family and your parenting journey.
Yeah, well, I have a 5 and a 7-year-old, and we live in the suburbs of Richmond, and we are currently just navigating, homework and coloring and things like that. But I am already thinking about the fact that they're going to be quickly, I know time goes by so fast, quickly behind the wheel, and it terrifies me.
It goes so fast. Yeah. And just trying to think of our littles, especially when they're 5 and 7, and you're like, okay, they're not quite ready, obviously, to drive yet, but you still, isn't it crazy as a parent? Sometimes you look at your little one and you picture them doing something really grown up, and it's hard to imagine.
True. And, I'm like the number one advocate for as soon as that child is facing forward in their car seat, then they're watching everything that you're doing.
Yes.
Right. So, right away, you have to be thinking about you're teaching them to drive as soon as they're facing you, right? As soon as they can see what you're doing behind the wheel, you're already setting up their driving behaviors because you're the one teaching them right away. So, I know it's a lot to think about, but, knowing that you are already, putting on your seatbelt, not using your phone, talking to them. I talk to my kids all the time about do not be a distraction for mommy and daddy, stop fighting, stop asking me to unwrap your snack. I've had to pull over a few times into a parking lot and say this is not okay. Mommy needs to focus on driving. So my kids know, and they've talked to other people that have driven them. They've said, they've called me out. Your kids have called me out about it. And I'm like, good. Yes, I've done it right, because they're soaking it up. They're a sponge.
And I think that's going to be an epiphany for a lot of parents to hear that, thinking, oh my gosh, from the moment they're facing forward, they can truly see everything we do, the good and the not so good. So I think that's a really valuable lesson.
Yeah, if you wait till 14, 15 when you're thinking about them driving, it's too late. They've seen you and they're like, you're a hypocrite. You're going to tell me not to speed. Yes. You're going to tell me not to be on my phone, but you've been doing it for the past 10 years. I've watched you, So, really and truly, it starts right away.
Yep. We can't expect them to do what we don't do. And that's a very valuable lesson right there. We're going to dive into a lot of these very valuable lessons. But for people who have not heard of Drive Smart Virginia, can you share a bit about your organization?
Sure. We are a 501c3, so a nonprofit. We service the entirety of Virginia. And we were formed in 1995, mostly by your major car insurance companies. But now we do all sorts of activities. We really, our mission is really to just make the roads safer by public education and awareness. So we're really big on education and kind of the soft and warm and fuzzy. We're friends with enforcement, but they put that message out and then we support them with our, we want you to make it home because we do. Unfortunately, there's too many families this holiday season that are not going to have all of their loved ones at the table because of a crash. And for us, that's unacceptable. Yes. And so we're going to talk to the driving public about what they can do to, to save lives on our roadways.
Yeah, you really do. It's the crashes many times are preventable. And if you just learn the right skills off the bat, that's huge. So I love what Drive Smart Virginia is doing for our kids in schools and throughout the Commonwealth. Why don't we talk a little bit about teen driving and focus on getting them ready to drive? I know that we talked about when kids are young, but what I'm thinking right now is how young can they actually start practicing? And for those of us who are rookie parents who have had no teen drivers yet, what is the process of, getting the license and figuring out when they're allowed to start.
Sure. And I'm going to talk to this from the Virginia aspect because I'm guessing most of your listeners are Virginia. So, when your teen turns 15 years old and at 15 years, 6 months old, they can get their learner's permit. But first they have to pass a test. It's a written test. And then they can hold their learner's permit for 9 months, and then they would be able to move into the licensing phase. But they also have to have completed a approved driver's education class. So a lot of schools offer that in public schools. You can also go and do that in a private school and pay for it if you don't have it in your public school. And then you also have to do 45 hours behind the wheel, with 15 of those being at night. And typically that's where the parent comes in and, the teen is in the driver's seat and the parent is in the passenger seat and guiding them through those difficult 45 hours. But I will say there is a guide. There is a wonderful guide, and it's from safeteendriving.org. So if you go on there, you can get a guide, and it will tell parents kind of the best tools and tricks to get through that 45 hours and make sure that your teen is getting the best of every scenario that they might encounter. Because remember, this is you training them to then be on the road by themselves. So I know, like, some people are scared. I don't want to take them out in the rain. I don't want to take them out when it's snowing. But if they don't get that now, like while you're in that 45 hours, when are they going to get it by themselves? I mean, that's scary to think about.
You do not want that.
You want to be there and kind of navigate them through those difficult moments as well. And the 15 at night is imperative. And I would suggest, if you can do more than 45 hours and more than 15 at night, the more time that they get behind the wheel, the better.
I understand that there's 45 hours of time, but I feel like that's no amount of time. You just need to do so much more. On the other side of the break, I want to hear from you about advice that you have for parents about how to remain calm and the best practices when we are in the car with our kids when they are learning to drive. So we are going to talk about that more with Kristen Petway of Drive Smart Virginia, and we will be right back.
Whether you're already working in education or aspiring to, then say yes to NPS. Norfolk Public Schools are currently hiring in the following positions. NPS offers the highest salaries and sign-on bonuses in Hampton Roads, plus a work lifestyle you'll love. Say yes to NPS.
Welcome back to Parenting Unscripted, where we are continuing our conversation with Kristen Petway of Drive Smart Virginia. She's given some great advice already about understanding when our children are going to start driving and advice for parents. So, Kristen, I want to continue the conversation about prepping parents to get behind the wheel with their kids. I know that the best advice is to try to stay calm, but how do we do that? What are the best practices for us once we get in the car?
Yeah, parents, I feel you. We're asked this like Herculean task that nobody really preps us for. We are, we are going off of our own personal experiences, what we learned many years ago when we learned to drive. And we're asked to teach our teens to do a big responsibility. And unfortunately, one of the leading causes of death for teens in America is driving. So we want to give them the tools to keep themselves safe. So I get it. It's nerve-wracking, and it takes a lot of patience. And I was telling you earlier, Katie, I know I still have a few years to go, but I already see that it is going to be my husband that teaches our kids to drive, because I will be such a nervous wreck just knowing what could be happening. So I do think that you need to identify like who is going to be the best person for that role in your life, and then just again making sure that you are equipping them with what they need. So having them drive in all the different scenarios and coaching them through it from your personal experiences is going to be the foundation of their success. So taking deep breaths, if you need them to pull over because you've had a close call or you're too frazzled, do that, right? Just do it. Just ask them to pull over into a safe spot, hopefully parking somewhere. Take the time, get out of the car and walk around a little bit if you need to. Keeping your calm and your cool is going to allow for a better learning experience for them and a teaching experience for you. And it's easier said than done. I know it.
Yeah, you don't want to stress them out because then they're already white knuckling behind the wheel and they're nervous enough.
Right.
But I mean, it's a risk, but it's an important one that they have to take because you must learn to do this in order to get around and to succeed in life. What would you say are some of the best places to teach our children to drive? I mean, I'm from the sticks, so we could really drive anywhere because we didn't have highways. So what's the best way for them to start out?
It's a great question. And I think everything is very dependent on where you live, like you said. For me growing up, I remember my parents for the first few times taking me to the high school parking lot and just kind of getting the feel for it when school was out. So there was nobody around, and, but I think it depends on where you live. I do think it's important to make sure that they're navigating the roads that they're going to drive most regularly. So if you live in a neighborhood, if you live in the suburbs, how they're going to get to school, or maybe they have a job, or maybe they have a favorite place or a friend's house or something, just making sure that they're doing those roads and feeling most confident on those roads. But I also think if you're living in an area where they might be in the city or they might be in a rural area, to take the time to get them out to those roads, because you navigate those roads so differently, right? You navigate a city road differently than you navigate a rural road that might not have a shoulder, that might have trees right up on the road, and making sure you're pointing out to them, oh, that's a curve. And so we're slowing down. The speed limit says you slow down at the curve. You have to pay attention to those things. Too many teens try and take those turns too quickly, and the consequences are dire. So I think just making sure that you're giving them, again, the gamut of where they're going to be driving, get them on a highway, even though that's so scary, get them on a highway eventually. It doesn't have to be the first day.
Please don't. Don't do that to them on the first day.
Yeah, just making sure they see all of the areas that they're going to navigate. And that way they can feel confident when it does come time for them to do it alone, that they've been there, done that, and feel comfortable.
Man, I flashed to that scene in Clueless, the movie Clueless, if you remember, when they get on the highway and they did not mean to. We want our children to be ready, even if they make a wrong turn and get on the highway, that they're not going to have a full panic attack.
Absolutely.
And can stay calm. That scene just automatically flashes.
That is so funny. Yeah, absolutely remember that.
It was a great scene, but let's not have that happen to our own kids. So I learned to drive in the 90s, way back in the 1900s, as my child likes to tell me, my sweet angel 12-year-old. How are the lessons that we teach our kids now different from those of us who were born in the 80s or 90s? Because they're dealing with a lot more distractions, I guess.
It's so true. Yeah. I mean, first, obviously, the introduction of the cell phone in the car and that being such a big distraction and deterrent for focusing on the road. But also just having your friends in the car too. I mean, there are laws, and we can get into that a little bit later, but every friend or peer that they have in the car is going to be a distraction as well. And that gets worse because of them also having devices, right? So they're like, oh, look at this, let's play with the music, all these kinds of things. But also we have to remember the cars are so different that we drive now. Yeah. So if you have a vehicle that has some safety features, point out how those are going to be used, point out how they should be a benefit to your driver, blind spot warnings and lane departure warnings and forward collision warnings and, all the great things that we now have. We need to use them to our advantage and think about that when I know it's a hard thing to do, but think about that when you're giving your teen a car. It's a lot of times we want to give them the oldest one and the beaten down one because that's what they get. But think about the safety features that could be helping them, and they're the ones that need it the most. So
you just hurt my checkbook.
I know.
Man, I even told my son it's a rite of passage to get a junker. But you're right. Gosh darn it, you're right. And I don't want to have to spend that, but we will, because kids are priceless, and that makes sense now. So now I have to break that news to my husband right after this to say, hey, guess what? In many years still ahead, it's probably for the best to get that kind of car. So that is great advice. In about 30 seconds or so. Can you explain the law of how many kids can be in the car?
Yeah. So until they're 18, there are something called GDL licenses, so graduated driver licenses. They are prohibited from driving between midnight and 4 a.m. They're only allowed one passenger under the age of 21. And there are exceptions to these rules. So people can look into what those would be. But obviously, there's also a phone law here in Virginia and a seatbelt law. So no matter where you're sitting in the vehicle, buckled up, and the phone cannot be in your hand while you're driving at all.
Yep. Hands free with the cell phone. That's right. That's so fascinating about the ages of who can be in the car and how many people can be in there. That is, again, I feel like I'm a rookie parent with so many things because we have stories on it and we hear it, but to hear you say it really hits home today. On the other side of the break, I want people to hear about some of the amazing programs that Drive Smart Virginia has out there. And they even recognize some, of course, because I'm sure their kids will come home and talk about it. So stay with us. We are going to talk with Kristen Petway just a little bit longer. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to Parenting Unscripted, where we are continuing our conversation with Kristen Petway of Drive Smart Virginia. She is the executive director. Kristen, we've been chatting a bit about when our kids are finally licensed, the importance of parents remaining involved. What does that look like?
That is so critical, Katie, because I mean, we want to just be like, okay, good, they're on their own. But it is really important that we stay involved. I highly recommend that parents look into what kinds of apps you can get on your phones or your teens' phones. If you own those phones and you're paying for those phones, you can put those apps on the phones. And there are lots of them. And we can monitor their speed, their hard braking, where they are. So if they're not where they say they're going to be, but if their phone use, so they can, if they're using the phone, some of these apps can track that. And a lot of insurance companies those are free through your insurance companies, and they'll pay you to use them. So if you're doing well, you'll get a discount on your insurance. So it is helpful and an incentive, if you will.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend doing that. And then you can not just leave it at that. So if you are monitoring those things, having those conversations with your teens, if you are seeing a pattern of speeding or hard braking or phone use, then you need to be talking to them through that. And there are things like parent-teen contracts that you can download online for free. And they're basically an agreement. I'm going to take your car away and I'm going to take your license away if you're not going to follow this agreement, and lining up what your priorities are. So for me as a parent, it's like, all of the things, not speeding, not getting any kind of tickets, but also, making sure they're not using their phone, making sure they're staying with the, having so many peers in the car that they're allowed, hours that they're driving, all the, wearing their seatbelt, all those things. And if they're not following those, then you have to have repercussions for that.
Right. And I think that, I don't know if our children will ever fully know how much we love them. So I know that they're going to be like, I can't do anything. You're constantly watching me. But in this situation, this is really just to help keep them alive and learning how to, survive each day and to drive properly.
It's unfortunate how many families in my line of work I come across that have lost a young teenager because, of a silly, a silly road use. So we just want to make sure that they're taking it seriously, and that comes from you, right? If you take it seriously, they'll take it seriously. And I'm not saying to scare them about driving. Right, it's a privilege to drive, and it's an enormous responsibility. So we just want to make sure they understand that. And also, some of this comes from being a passenger as well. So just remember that your teens are passengers of others, and maybe doing some, I know this sounds a little bit strange, but doing some role playing at home, like if they feel uncomfortable with how someone is driving them. So if someone's using their phone or someone's speeding, or someone may have had drinks or marijuana and they're in an uncomfortable situation as a passenger, maybe if you've had those conversations at home and role play that at home, it will be an easier conversation for them to have to their friends. Because even as an adult, it is difficult for me to call out a driver, right? And be like, oh, don't do that. And people know what I do for a living. You know, I've done this for 16 years. My family, my friends, they know what I do. And it's hard even for me. So imagine how much harder it must be for teens to be like standing up to their friends and saying, please don't do that. But their lives are at stake and we need to remind them of that. Yeah. Whoever's driving them, they have the responsibility of whoever's in the car's lives, right?
Yeah, so that's very true. Let's talk about programs that Drive Smart Virginia offers, because I know that there are several and they're pretty amazing. We can start maybe with the simulator.
Yeah, thank you. So about 10, 11 years ago, we went into some high schools around Virginia and did some focus groups with teens. And we asked them, you know, this has been a problem. Driving safely has been a problem with teens for generations. And how can we change this, right? We do not want this to be a leading cause of death anymore. And what came out of that conversation with the teens again and again and again was, I feel like we need to experience it. Well, that is not what we want. I don't want you to experience a crash. I don't want you to lose a loved one or be, injured in a dangerous situation. So we started to develop a program where, as much as we can, get it realistically so that they can experience it in a safe environment. So we have several simulators. They actually get behind the wheel of a vehicle. It has sensors built in, and then they put on VR goggles, and then it goes through a roadway scenario, and we ask them to do dangerous situations in a safe environment. The car's not moving, texting, grabbing for a bottle of water in the back, messing with the radio. And then we have like a ticket that they get so they can see all the things they did wrong. Running off the road, speeding, going too slow. Some of them are going like 5 miles per hour.
Right. That's also not good.
Yeah. So as realistic as it's going to get, because they're actually behind the wheel of a vehicle and using the pedals and using the steering. And then we bring that to schools with other activities. We have a grant through State Farm, and we have a grant through Mile One Auto Group. And in both those cases, we can go to schools and bring these activities. We have a pedal cart with drunk goggles to show them the dangers of impaired driving. We partner with the local police to ask them to do like traffic stop demonstrations. We do traffic safety trivia. We have victim families come. So the students can cycle through all those different activities in the program.
There's so many options for them. I think that's incredible. What about the Speed Busters program?
We just launched this. I'm so excited about it. This is for us to reach those younger kids. And of course, this is close to my heart since I have younger kids. But what we found is when we're educating people at the age of driving, it's too late. They're already developing habits that are hard to break. So why don't we start really young, like before they even get behind the wheel, and talk to them about safe driving. So Speedbusters goes, it's a self-run program. We send them the toolkits and all the information they need, and the teachers or the SRO officers at the school can run it themselves. And they are in the, a safe area off the side of the road of their schools, and they're looking to see how fast the traffic is moving in their school zones. And we either lend them one of the radar detector devices, the speed detector devices, or the SRO will use one from their office. But they can, take all of that information down, all the speeds. And then what we do is we have them make signs, yard signs, and signs that come up around the community that ask people to slow down and pay attention and buckle up and all that. And then we have them go back afterwards and see, after they've gotten that education, what the speeds are again. So they do it all over again. And we've seen like about a 5 to 6 mile per hour reduction in speed by this program. And it's just getting that foundation set. The kids I've seen them do it, and they can tell when they observe when someone is speeding coming into their speed. They're like, they're going too fast. And they know. It's amazing to me.
I think that's absolutely incredible. You're doing such great things with Drive Smart Virginia. Kristen Petway, thank you so much for being here with us today. It was such valuable information.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Parenting Unscripted. Remember, you can watch new episodes of Parenting Unscripted every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. Right here on Wavy Plus. I hope you have a great day. Be good.